Right, John,
8:15
reaching
Eastern.
hour, as they say.
Okay.
Okay, so if anyone is there, I don't think you are there, but if you are there, room. And so look, last week, John, you started off by asking me what was it? What was my learning edge around conversational leadership, or
Mhm.
any any recent insights? And I didn't talk directly about conversational leadership, but I talked about this adjacent possible. And I've actually written something about that since.
Okay.
I need to just tidy it up and share it with you. Both the adjacent possible concept and conversations in the adjacent possible, because that does make a lot of sense. So
Mhm.
anyway, I inflicted some of my thoughts and views on you. What have you been? What have you been thinking about? What keeps you awake at night? Yeah.
Hopefully we can go back and forth and do it. Yeah, make it as conversational as we can. Yeah, we didn't, we were just talking a few minutes ago, and so zero prep for me. So this will just be totally off the top of my head. What is candidly, yeah, either keeping me up or exciting right now? Um, I still think what comes up first, but let me explore with myself. To me, these disciplines of knowledge management, the whole discipline is trying to change. Organization development as a discipline is trying to change and mature and adapt. And then, the pieces I bring in are diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, which I think is clearly changing and being challenged. Um,
Certainly is, yeah.
and then I happen to love that extra two more little pieces, the Gestalt psychotherapy space, especially, Gestalt psychotherapy, started as individual therapy, but now in the last just decade or two has come inside organizations. So they call
Okay.
it GPO, Gestalt Practitioner in Organizations. That's a very different thing. It's not the one-on-one
It's a
therapy.
bit
It's
of a
now
mouthful, that's for sure.
for sure, and they've got other acronyms with it too.
Yes, General
So
Post Office. Lovely.
well, yeah, see. Well, I meant in Gestalt, like other
Okay.
Gestalt, and then project management. I always say there's a little splash
Ah,
of
project
project
management.
management. So that's where my mind goes first, is I don't know which one to pick. They're all sh and to me, conversational leadership is a little bit of an umbrella, or at least like you talked about last week, an adjacent, very close to
But it's
both
kind of
of the
got
world.
tentacles, hasn't it, that sort of spreads into everything because you can't remove conversation from being human.
Mhm. Mhm.
It touches everything in many ways. So yeah.
Without jumping ahead to our next question, maybe I do bring it into what you and I have been talking about or wondering for a long time is some of the pushback we get on conversational leadership, and maybe it's not direct, and maybe it isn't pushback, but the questions are, the challenge is conversation really action? Or what is action?
Do we
And
want to pick up on that one now, or save
uh,
it for another time?
only, I mean, yes and no, because I don't know that it's keeping me up at night. But it is like for me, like my question to you last week, it is right at my edge because I don't know.
Okay,
I think it's a fair
go with
challenge.
it.
So
Let's talk about it.
we can do
So
both.
why does it keep you awake?
Yeah.
Rather than in bed thinking about it and get going round and round in your
Yeah.
head, like, well, certainly things go round and round in my head. What
There-
is it that's going round in your head?
I would almost, me, I like to bring in the emotion to it. There's almost a feeling of irritation that comes
Mm.
with it, or I would somewhere between irritation and annoying. Um, that's
If
where it is for me.
anyone should dream of asking such an impertinent question,
Yeah, exactly. Stop.
they just
Um,
don't get it, do they?
but it's irritating, annoying because it's fair. So,
It is. That's right. It is fair in many ways.
oh, look, Rachel,
Ah,
Dr. T joined
Rachel.
us. Yay. Welcome.
Hey. Thank you, lovely Rachel. You're our first guest, our first visitor.
Join in, Rachel. What is
Yeah.
is conversation
Let,
act?
let us know if John's talking bullshit or not.
I think
Or me. I'm probably better at John at it.
what's
So
tricky
anyway,
about
yes, go on.
yeah.
It's what constitute does conversation constitute action?
I think let's start with the obvious, right? So like the obvious, when people are saying it, action means doing something,
Something.
right?
So
It
almost
means
physical.
like, yeah, like I don't know. Like we were just talking right before this, like opening and closing a door, right? An action is physically
Yeah,
doing
yeah,
something, creating a website, starting a project, finishing a project that delivers something,
yeah.
right? I think that's the obvious, that's the mindset of conversation isn't, I don't have time to talk about it because I've got stuff to do.
Would you include making a decision?
See, exactly. And I think that's the door. I think that's the bridge over to, yeah, make a
Because
decision.
it's totally ethereal. If making a decision and writing it down, are you doing something physical there? You're writing.
Yeah, exactly.
I often think that a lot of the time that's not the real question. I think what people are saying, um, I spend a lot of time in time wasting meetings. It's just people talking and talking and talking and going around in circles, and it gets absolutely nowhere. And yeah, conversation clearly isn't action.
And yet, what you and I would always say is that conversation, or is that, what's our favorite phrases? Parallel soliloquies,
That's your
and
favorite phrase.
I like it,
I know you like it, yeah.
and serial monologue. Both of
Serial
those
monologue,
are
yeah.
just
No,
such a real experience I have.
no. What's I going to say about it? I gave it a lot of thought a few weeks back, and the first my first line of thought was along the lines that you get conversations for action, so conversations that are going to lead to action.
Mm,
So making a decision would be the conversation that led up to making the decision would be a conversation for action. And I thought, well, you know, you can't make the decision without having the conversation. So, maybe we're getting a little bit pedantic by talking about it being conversation for action. Maybe it really is action.
mm. I
What what
mean,
what, what do you make of that?
I still tend to believe that the conversation is the action, but I can't prove it, and I don't have that's why I like
You
the
can't
expression.
prove it.
I don't have the words to describe it yet, but maybe we go the far other extreme, which is maybe a bit unfortunate, but like I guess maybe because it's out in the world, but like war, I think of like guns and bombs,
That's
right?
action.
That's action, right? And I think,
Signing a peace treaty? No, that's not action.
see, so, and exactly. So, and that's what you hear with like, wartime and like that kind of extreme action is because the conversation didn't happen, right? Or it was didn't go
Yes.
well,
Yeah.
or a missed conversation. What's Patricia Shaw's, Dr. Shaw's, like convening conversations that otherwise wouldn't happen, right?
Exactly.
Like to
Yeah.
me, if those actions are happening, it's because the conversational action didn't happen.
hmm Now, as I say, I thought long and hard about it, and because like you, I get irritated by it, and I couldn't give an answer to it. And then all of a sudden, a little light bulb went off in my head. I thought, this is the wrong question. We shouldn't be asking, is conversation action?
Mm,
Um, we should be asking about anything that we do, whether it's conversation or action itself or whatever. Is it valuable? Is it of value? And then it changes everything. So, is a conversation to better understand an issue of value? Yes. Is a conversation of value to build a relationship with you, John? Yes, it is. Is a conversation of valuable uh, to to make a decision? Of course it is. So it's the wrong question. We should be saying not is it because it's a kind of pedantic, isn't it? We're talking about linguistics. We should stop looking at it that way and say is the conversation we're about to have or the conversation we've just had is it of value?
mm,
And if it is, then it's worth having. If it's
maybe.
not, because we sit around for an hour and talk about all sorts of stuff and don't make any decisions and maybe get angry with each other and polarized and what have you, then that's not of value. And I think that's what most people mean when they say, well, conversation is a waste of time.
Yeah. So then maybe the reframing of the question is, what is value? What does value mean? And where does
Yes.
value come from? As opposed to is conversation action? And yet my mind went somewhere else. Let me see if I can remember it, but I was listening to you. No, I think I lost it. Conversation action. I was thinking about something in the workplace. Oh, well, I had a couple of thoughts going while you were talking. And the second one is almost back to your first question and see if this relates into his conversation action. I did get both. Thought. So is conversation action or is this conversation of value? Is this action of value? How about is this thought of
Of
value?
value. Yeah.
Right? And then you could get into the whole thought. Is this emotion of value?
Of value.
Yeah. And
It's a
and
good question to ask of anything, isn't it?
and then that brings me over to what my thought after it was ego. So this is a very candid, a bit humble for me. Is I love this whole other field that I wouldn't say is really that close to conversational leadership, but it's called ego development or vertical development, adult development. They've got different names for it, but it's the whole idea of like. You are not your thoughts, or you can develop your ego. We all have egos, but you can develop it. Um, and that's been humbling and actually has literally kept me up a couple of nights where it's like, if I get feedback and it hurts and I react to it and there's an emotional response to it, it's much more likely that it's my ego reacting to it versus some kind of like seeing it, understanding it, relating to it, like we're talking about with conversation. So maybe I pause there, but do you see where I'm going with like,
Oh, yes. Yeah.
where does thought come in? Where does ego come in? Where does like what I kind of hear you saying, which is like relating to each other, is you said it like it's valuable to you to relate to me. Same for me. So why is it that in some instances, in some moments, it's not of value to relate. It's of value to do the physical action.
It's very contextual, isn't it? There are some people I don't particularly want to relate to.
Mm,
Um, so I'm just trying to process the ego
sure.
piece because I understand what you're saying there. That's, is it your ego that's responding maybe defensively to something? We all do that.
Yep.
Um, that's a big
But
part of being human. But
right.
how does it quite relate? How are you relating it to this
I,
question?
I guess the closest I can do is the good old Dr. Ed Shine work, like levels of conversation.
Okay.
And so if we're having a transactional conversation, I don't know. Um, Thanks, Rachel. See ya. Um,
Bye, Rachel. Yeah.
uh,
I basically, hang on, just let's just say goodbye to Rachel. Rachel, a big, big thanks. You are first and only guest. Come back again.
and
We would love to see you.
she's subscribed. Yay, we got a
Let
subscriber.
us let us know what you make of all the gibberish we're
My,
talking here.
my kids would be very
Okay.
happy. I'm learning to get subscribers. Mash that subscribe button.
Yeah.
Um, oh, Dr. Ed Shine's levels of conversation. So I don't know, I've never thought about this, but is that four levels and that top level is transactional conversations.
Mhm.
So is a transactional conversation action, or what we're talking about now,
Okay.
ha- is my ego more involved in a transactional conversation? And I'm gonna pretty much say yes,
Oh,
because I have this belief that there's something like deeper or broader than your ego. Like what does Freud call it? Id or superego, something like that. And I think Ed Shine's levels of conversations directly relate to like it's almost pure ego in those autopilot daily transactional conversations. But as soon as you go down a couple of levels to emotional conversations, identity conversations, shared identity conversations, those to me have to be, sure, your ego can be there, but it's got to be something deeper. And with those examples of like war or, setting up a new intranet or some, office job action, I think a lot of them are transactional. And I'm not sure that those lower levels that are deeper than your ego are allowed or ready or happening very much. And you know me, my focus is kind of inside organizations, but I would dare say in general, even beyond organizations. It's easier to, you talked about it's being human, right? I think there's an easier way to be human of autopilot and do a little bit of people pleasing, a little bit of perfectionism, a little bit of like there's a socially accepted norm in lots of different cultures for what to think, what to do. Just go do those things and everything will work out. What is there to talk about?
Autopilot's a big issue because I think so often in conversations, actually very quickly in a conversation we're on autopilot. We lose awareness. Um, I always like Stephen Covey's idea of there being a gap, a space between stimulus and response. And maybe now, we're having this conversation online, so that gap is probably quite large. We're probably thinking carefully before we say anything. Um, we don't want to make idiots of ourselves.
Well,
But maybe when we're in a conversation with a loved one and the conversation's flowing, and that's one of the nice things about it when the conversation is really flowing, that there is no gap really between stimulus and response.
or there's something going on where you're such like flow state or something
Yeah,
where like
it's a flow
you're
state.
you're processing that gap so fast, maybe
Yeah,
even
yeah.
skillfully, that yeah, it's just working. So compare that to, let me ask you a question that's similar but different. When you get into your challenging conversations, real tension, real differing views, do you
Yeah.
find much more space? Is it,
Oh, yeah. Plenty.
yeah, yeah,
I
me
think in
too.
challenging conversations, I slow right down and um, I say as little. I listen intently, or I try to.
Yeah.
And I say no more than I need to say.
Mm.
I would tend to give yes, no answers. I don't want to give the other person ammunition,
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
which isn't necessarily an appropriate response. Again, it depends on the context.
So then that goes, okay, so we've done this before in conversational leadership where we sort of make sure we always make it clear that there are levels of conversation. There's like the conversation I have by myself in my head. There's the conversation that the two of us have, and there's
Mhm.
more levels, but there's some kind of, societal conversation
Yes,
going on too. That what did we've got words for that. I can't, oh, discourse, I think is,
public discourse is,
yeah.
and of course, discourse can be more than just conversations. So all the all the tweeting on Twitter and the like.
So
Um,
then back to your very first question of me, like, hey,
mm,
what's not so much keeping me up, but been interesting to me lately is I haven't asked you this yet, so I really would love your thoughts. I've noticed this thing when I'm out lucky enough to, facilitate classes, facilitate workshops. Some of the workshops I do are repeat. It's basically the same workshop that I've done for 5, 10, 20 years. Um,
yes,
but it's
okay.
fascinating. One of the reasons I can keep doing basically the same exercises, the same material, it tweaks and iterates and gets a little bit
Mhm.
better. What's fascinating to me is a completely different group of people are experiencing this workshop for the first time.
Right.
And I notice, again, I can't quite prove it or quite put the words to it, but all I can simply say is the questions and the conversations are better the second, third, fourth, fifth time that I run it than the first time.
What, with the same group or different group?
Totally different group.
Different group, yeah.
Different group. So, but
Yeah,
back to that
if you've been
collective.
running it 20 years, you're looking back over 10, 20 years of similar conversations, but you're saying over that time period, the conversations are getting better.
Get better. And how is
So,
that possible, right? Wouldn't you think it seems obvious to me, like if I run basically the same workshop with different people, I get question number one in the first time I run it, you would think that's a good question, right? You'd think almost every time I would get that same question. That's not what I find. I find that workshop number one, I get question number one. Workshop number two, I get a question that's more advanced than question number one, as if the people in the second group were in the first group and they weren't.
so
Some,
I'm just wondering to what degree, because over the last 20 years, we've had social media and people have been, even if not joining in on social media, or, you got social media where people are watching another conversation, even if it's an argument, a heated one. Um, they're either watching them or they're involved in them. Or what I find interesting is on YouTube, the comments on YouTube. I will often read the comments on YouTube to see the different opinions. Um, and so maybe people have got without actually having the face-to-face conversations, maybe people have learned
And it's
something
like,
from social
again, it's
media.
like that collective unconscious or some ripple effect, something where, yeah, are they actually directly reading things? Or is there something bigger at play where like somebody learns something and it strangely sort of becomes available to others, even without.
Because you would think that people these days might be having less conversation because they're tied up on their phones, that they're watching Netflix, endlessly. Um, we I think it's a lot of evidence that we're a lot less social than we were, say, 20 years ago. So
Mm.
you'd actually expect conversations to be not so good.
And I think that's true in a lot of cases.
Maybe that's a good place to start.
Maybe it is 20 minutes exactly
We can we can pick up on some of these threads
next
another
week.
time. Indeed. So thank you, everyone. Well, at least thank you, Rachel. Anybody who's watching this recording, I just got to find the stop button. Where's the stop button? Live stream.